Greetings, folks. This is Book of Mormon Chiasmus. Today I wanted to give a definition of chiasmus and some examples from the Bible to help teach how the parallel forms are set up so that you can kind of observe them in the Book of Mormon and see that they definitely are doing the same things in both books. So today we're going to take a look at Isaiah 6, and just as a general statement, chiasmus by definition is a statement of terms in one order and then a statement of the terms in a reverse order. So as in A, then B, then C prime, then B prime, then A prime. Then sometimes the sections in the top or the bottom, in the bottom versus the top, might add some more information to how things were stated in the top, or they might be a contrast to the statements in the top. So those are both things that I've seen done in the chiasmus statements, either adding to the understanding or contrasting. Now, why did the ancients use chiasmus? And it's possible that it may have been done for memorization, because anciently, um, a lot of folks just memorized text instead of learning to read and write. The skill of reading and writing was rare, and it was usually only the wealthy or educated who were able to read and write. So they may have done this for memorization. Also, Hebrew as a language had no punctuation, no paragraphs. So if you were trying to form a concept, what they did is they would state the same thing twice at the beginning and the end of a concept. And there's a technical term for this called inclusio. So whenever an ancient writer wanted to formulate a break in the concept, he would use the same statements at the beginning of the end, kind of like what we do in a chapter or maybe a paragraph. And then it's also possible that the structure of a chiasmus is a mimic to the menorah in the temple, the stylized tree of life, where it has curved branches where one can run into the other. So I kind of like to think about that the ancients were doing this form of chiasmus because by paralleling their statements or matching them, they were kind of doing the structure of I guess it would be a menorah on its side. And so those are all some of the reasons why they may have done this anciently. And so we're going to look at how this works in both the book of Isaiah and the book of John in the New Testament, so we can learn some things. So on the screen, I have Isaiah chapter 6, and I kind of want you to notice that in the beginning, there's an A term, and it has some words that are going to show up later, but that aren't part of the chiasmus. So you can see that there's the word here and see in the A section, but they don't show up in the A prime section, which is interesting. But they do show up later in the chiasmus. And so that's one of the things I wanted to point out, is that sometimes the words that are used within the chiasmus or in the beginning show up randomly in other places in the chiasmus, and that's perfectly fine for that to occur. But I do notice that in the C prime term, it's the word see that shows up first, whereas in the A term up above, the word see showed up second. And so down below in the B term, the word here shows, or B prime term here shows up, but it was the first term up above. So that is interesting. That may be due to something called Seidel's law. And Seidel was basically the guy that discovered this. And he said sometimes when you repeat something again, you just reverse the order of the terms. Usually it's associated with a later prophet stating something that an earlier prophet stated. He'll just repeat it in reverse. And I guess the thought is that people memorize scriptures, so whenever they heard something in one order, if you would recognize it, but if you just state it in reverse, you'd know that you were quoting an earlier prophet. So that's Seidel's law. I'll kind of mention that once or twice here. But so it's just kind of interesting that the terms here and see do appear in reverse order lower in the chiasmus, but they are not in the place to form the chiasmus structure. So also notice that in the B term, the words ears match up with the idea of hear, up above, and in the C area, the word eyes matches up with C in the A section. So there's kind of an ordering. You hear with your ears and you see with your eyes. And so there is an ordering of concepts where hearing and ears comes first and seeing and eyes comes second. So that isn't something else that they can do in chiasmus to make these terms match up, is just repeat them in the order that they kind of make sense. So now notice in the section A, I have both a little a and a little b term that's highlighted there, and that's also repeated in the section down below in the a prime term. So the term that makes the match is understand not above, and down below it's understand. And then in the B term, you have heart, make the heart of the people fat up above, and down below that their hearts or their heart and convert and be healed. And so that's what's kind of known as a simple alternate structure, where within the lines of the chiasmus you can have more than one term, kind of in a alternate pattern. So simple alternate is just an A and a B, but you can have longer terms. You could have an A, B, C, D, E, or something like that, and that's called an extended alternate pattern. And so I have noticed that these terms of putting an A and a B, or an A and a B and a C, those can happen anywhere within the chiasmus. It could be on the A line or the B line or the C line or the D line or the E line. But if it happens up above in that slot, it happens down below in that slot to be nicely matching in chiasmus. So I just thought I'd point out that in this chiasmus at the beginning, in the A and the A prime terms, you have a little a and a little b, and those two terms are in the same order. You have first understand, and then you have heart. So that's good chiasmus structure. Um, Now, something to kind of notice up above, it's an understand not, while below it's a positive understand. And this is the idea of contrasting that can occur as a parallel match. And so they're contrasting concepts. Here it's using the same word, but I've seen before that it's a negative term. They could be different words, but similar concepts. They just contrast. So that's something that happens in chiasmus from time to time. Also, um, everything in the top of this chiasmus is a negative statement. It's such as it's understand not, perceive not, the heart is fat, and the ears are heavy, and the eyes are shut. Whereas working your way out of the chiasmus in the bottom, it's all positive. So, such as they see with their eyes, they hear with their ears, they understand with their heart, and they convert, and they are healed. So that's something that is interesting in some of these structures. Is there's a contrast not only in the individual terms in the chiasmus, but in fact the entire chiasmus can be structured as a contrast. So here in the top, everything's negative, and the bottom, everything is positive. So that's a really interesting way to form a chiasmus, and it is something that the ancients did to make good parallel terms, and often they just contrast the terms to kind of teach something better. And I've also seen that kind of working your way out of the middle of a chiasmus to the end, they will add extra concepts to the terms to kind of help you understand what they're trying to teach you better. And so often there's more text in the bottom of the chiasmus than there is in the top of the chiasmus. So kind of moving in, like the overall form of the chiasmus, you can see there's an A and a B and the C. The A is made up of understand not and heart. B is made up of ears, and C is made up of eyes. So if you look at the C prime term, you see eyes repeated. Then the B prime term, you hear ears repeated. And in the A prime term, you see understand and heart repeated. So those things happen in reverse order from how they were stated in the front. And that's kind of the basic concept behind what makes a chiasmus. So some other interesting things, if you look at um, in the chiasmus, you notice in the line B and B prime, you have the word ears that matches in both the top and the bottom of the chiasmus. And then in the C and C prime terms, you see eyes and that matches eyes again in the C prime. So how you can find the center of chiasmus is look for the statement that's repeated in a very similar way right next to each other, and that can sometimes say, oh, this is the middle of the chiasmus. So here you have, and shut their eyes lest they see with their eyes. So that's kind of identifies, it's the turnaround of the middle of the chiasmus, and that is something to look for when you're looking for them. Also notice that in C prime, it is a potential parallel to eyes. And let's see, I said in B, let's see, C can be a parallel to eyes, and in the B prime here can be a parallel with their ears. Okay, so I've got some notes that I'm reading off of because there's just so much detail in this. So in C prime, notice, so you see with your eyes and you hear with your ears. So kind of working your way out, they're adding a little bit more detail because, you see with your eyes and you hear with your ears. And above, it's the ears that were shut and the eyes that were closed. And so there is a secondary parallel matching term on each of these lines. So C is a parallel with eyes, and here is a parallel with ears. So that's kind of interesting. So that's kind of a simple chiasmus structure in Isaiah 6. You can kind of see the overall A, the B, the C terms, and then the repeat C prime, the B prime, and the A prime term. You can see a simple alternate. Above, you have an A and a B, so understand, not, and heart. And down below, you see that again, understand and heart in that order. And so this is kind of a nice little chiasmus. It's fun to see it in Isaiah. And Isaiah is kind of a master at this. He did quite a few of these, as well as other parallel forms. Literally, I realized that everything in Isaiah is repeated at least twice throughout the whole book. But he also does quite a few chiasmus structures. So I want to contrast that with the same chiasmus in the chapter of John, verses 13 through 18. So I'll put those up on the screen here. And what's interesting is it uses the same scripture, but the either Jesus Christ expands it or whoever wrote John expanded it so that the chiasmus is even bigger. And so one of the things that you can know about in a chiasmus or a parallel structure is later prophets can interpret or alter the words of earlier prophets or earlier chiasmuses. So I think that's important. And here's an example of how a later author is, I guess, adding to what a previous author did. So that's perfectly lawful if you are an authorized prophet, that you can interpret or add to previous prophets. So notice in this section in John chapter 13 that there is in the B line, there is both a A and a B little term. It's a C, and here is the A and the B up above, and down below in the B prime, you also have C and here. So this is an example of a simple alternate, but notice it's in a different place than the original Isaiah term. So Isaiah used the simple alternate in the A term, but here in John, the simple alternate is in the B term. And so, as I mentioned, these alternate structures can show up on any of the lines in a chiasmus. So that could have been in line D. So in D prime, you could have had a D, an A, and a B, and a D prime, an A, and a B, or a D, ABC, and a D prime, ABC. So that's kind of, as you learn chiasmus, you can find these in various places. Now, something I did notice that was interesting in the chiasmus in John, notice that the concept of seeing comes first and hearing is second. But in Isaiah, the concept of hearing is first and seeing is second. So this could be an example of Seidel's law again, whereas in John, because he's using this previous statement of Isaiah to be good Hebrew, you're going to reverse some of the terms. And so this is attributed to Jesus Christ. So if it is, he's a master dictator of chiasmus, because this is just a masterpiece of chiasmus here that we're going to look at. So I'll attribute it to Jesus in all of these, and kind of as we look through this, there's just a whole bunch of amazingness that goes through. So if you look in the B term up above, you'll see a parallel matching between seeing and see. So he's stating something twice. So that is a parallel term on that same line. And then in the B term, you have hearing and hear. So these are really interesting matches. It's in the simple alternate, but it's a double parallel in that section. Now, what I find is really interesting is in the bottom, in the B prime term, he repeats those words twice again, but notice he adds more detail to it. So up above, it just says, because they seeing see not, and down below it says, have desired to see those things which ye see and have not seen them. And up above, and hearing they hear not, down below, and to hear those things which ye hear and have not heard them. I just noticed I didn't mark heard them, but it's kind of the same concept. So down below, he's kind of expanding the parallel up above. So seeing occurs twice, hearing occurs twice up above, but then down below, when he repeats those two things twice, he expands on those concepts again. So that's a really cool understanding of something that Jesus Christ did. He took the chiasmus, expanded it, and also notice he chose different terms to start the chiasmus with. It was originally the understand and heart that formed the outside, and here he's choosing a different term to start his chiasmus with, the idea of seeing and hearing. So I just find that that's interesting. Um, so something else to kind of look at is in the C terms, you see that there's a strong anchor of repeated words in both the C and C prime that show, hey, there's a chiasmus here, look for it. And the words are in purple. It's prophecy and prophets. So that's the only two times where those words are repeated, once up above, once down below, whereas within the chiasmus, there's several repetitions of see and eyes and ears and hearing. So sometimes it makes it harder to find the chiasmus if you just get a whole lot of repetition. But when you see a very strong statement of unique words, you can kind of anchor the what you see in the text and say, oh, there's a chiasmus here, I just need to look deeper. So the two words prophecy and prophets that both show up in the C term tell you there is a chiasmus here, you need to look for the parallel terms. This is also repeated in the F and F prime terms because the word heart only shows up in these two locations. So this is a double location where you have a prophecy happens in the right place in two different spots, and heart appears in two different places. And that's how you kind of know, hey, there is a larger chiasmus and I need to look more carefully. The center term, again, is the double repetition of the word eyes. So those happen immediately right after each other. So that kind of clues you in that, hey, there's a center of a chiasmus. And so that is something to know about a chiasmus, is you're looking for something that's repeated twice, either a word or a concept right next to each other, and that says, hey, you just found the middle of a chiasmus. Start looking outward, and then you can look for other terms like, oh, I see prophets up above and below, I think there's a chiasmus here. Oh, I see heart up above and heart below, I think there's a chiasmus here. So that's kind of how you can find these in the scriptures when no one else has found them. If you start to see terms repeated a couple times, start looking around for these ancient forms, and I bet you will find them. So let's see. Notice that in the D lines, there is another parallel between the idea of hearing and hear, and down below in D, ears and hear. So even though the words are all slightly different, these are matches. So in D up above, hearing, ye shall hear, still matches in the D prime down below, ears, for they hear. So ears are what you hear with, and so those are kind of a match term. And then on the E lines, you have a similar duplication. So E says, seeing ye shall see and not perceive, and down below in the E prime, but blessed are your eyes, for they see. So eyes see, and up above, seeing ye shall see. So those are two statements of matched terms, and notice the reverse order. Up above, you have D of hearing and then E of seeing, and down below, E prime is about eyes and seeing, and that was E prime, and then the D prime, your ears and hearing. So you can see those concepts are reversed, which is good chiasmus structure. Notice that Christ changed how the words understand were used. So in Isaiah's structure, understand and understand not formed matching lines, but in Christ's chiasmus, they don't match. So you have in D and shall not understand, and in F prime and should understand. And so he pulled them out of the original chiasmus. They're still in the same place in Isaiah's chiasmus because he kind of just move these words. You can see I put them on the same lines, so you can see Isaiah 6 to the left and John 13 to the right. But the concept of understand got pulled out, and he's not using those anymore. He's changing it to eyes and ears. So I just think that's really interesting that a later prophet can alter a chiasmus, and it's considered, I guess, good Hebrew. So I think that's kind of cool. It's interesting. Um, Something to point out again in John 13, notice that everything in the top of the chiasmus is again all negative, while everything in the bottom of the chiasmus is all positive. So again, this is all contrasting. So in the top, uh, because they seeing see not, hearing they hear not, neither do they understand. Hearing, indeed, again, hearing ye shall hear and shall not understand, seeing ye shall see and shall not perceive. For this people heart is waxed gross, so their ears are dull of hearing, and their eyes they have closed. So all of that is a negative statement. And going down on the bottom, everything contrasting is a positive statement. So, lest any time they should see with their eyes and hear with their ears and understand with their hearts and should be converted, and I should heal them. But blessed are your eyes, speaking to the apostles, for they see, and your ears, for they hear. For verily I say unto you that many prophets and righteous men have desired to see the things that you see, but did not get to see them, and to hear the things that you hear, but did not hear them. So he's saying, you are blessed because you get to see and hear the things that the prophet wished, and you do understand with your hearts, and I can heal you. So I just think that's really kind of a beautiful form that Christ did here. Is he extended the contrasting idea through this whole chiasmus. He expanded it, doubled up a whole bunch, many more terms, did it in some really beautiful contrasting ways. And so you can really learn a lot about chiasmus and about Hebrew poetic parallel matches just by looking at these two chiasmus structures, one in Isaiah, one in John 13, because you can learn a lot about how a good chiasmus is formed just by looking at these. So one more thing I wanted to point out, notice in the A and the A prime term up above, you have the word parables. Down below, it says, hear ye therefore the parable of the sower, and then the line or the concept continues. And I just want to point out that even though the A prime term is a perfect match for the A term up above, it can also be the beginning of a different structure. So sometimes these structures can overlap just a little bit, and the last few lines of the chiasmus up above could be included in the chiasmus beneath. And so I have noticed that that happens sometimes in the Book of Mormon, and I think it must be perfectly good Hebrew structure to kind of crisscross or overlap some chiasmus structures. So I thought that's kind of interesting. So overall, I just wanted to give you kind of a quick rundown of some concepts that I have seen in chiasmus. I have read a few books on the subject in Hebrew poetic parallel structures. I've tried to study, what I can, but I'm also kind of self-taught just by looking through the scriptures and looking at how the terms got matched. I've done some in the Old Testament, some in the New Testament, and then quite a few in the Book of Mormon as I've been looking for things. And it's very interesting seeing how the ancients did their matching as part of what they thought good scripture was, and it's fun to see that Jesus Christ also did this as he talked to, I don't know if it was the Pharisees or the Jews or whoever he was speaking about right here. Actually, I guess he's talking to his apostles right here, explaining why he did parables. But in the process of doing that, he's using perfect Hebrew parallel form, chiasmus form, which is interesting. So um, just as a side note, this idea of what chiasmus is not a well understood term even today, and it was less so during the time that Joseph Smith was around. It might be possible that somebody wrote a book about chiasmus. Um, Joseph Smith could have come across it, but it's really unlikely that he did so, and it's even more unlikely that if you did come across it, you'd want to put terms that structure within a book. If Joseph wasn't a true prophet, if he was trying to fabricate the Book of Mormon, um, putting chiasmus in a structure is really hard. It's difficult. It's not the way we think, and so we didn't discover that there was chiasmus within the Book of Mormon until 1967. It's kind of a fun story. It was a missionary named Jack Welsh who went to a Catholic seminary class, and the guy there was talking about chiasmus in the scriptures, and his statement was, if you because we find chiasmus in the New Testament, that's a proof to say that the New Testament wasn't originally written in Greek. It would have been written in Hebrew or Aramaic or whatever language they were using, because you don't do that in Greek languages. So his book was, because you see chiasmus in the New Testament, it proves that it was originally written in a different language, a Semitic language, not in Greek. So it's like it was originally written in Hebrew, and here's the proof. And it was interesting because the missionary woke up the next morning. He was woken up early with a thought in his mind that basically said, if chiasmus proves that the Bible was originally written in Hebrew, if you find it in the Book of Mormon, that would prove the Book of Mormon was originally written in Hebrew, or I guess in a Semitic language. So the missionary woke up, Jack, one morning, and he's like, oh, that's interesting. And he started reading in the Book of Mosiah, and he found that very day a great example of chiasmus in the Book of Mosiah. And he was just ecstatic. He was so excited. He shared it with his missionary companion. And then since that time, he found several others. And then many other people have found a ton of chiasmus structures within the Book of Mormon. There's literally hundreds of them. And so it's just interesting that no one had any idea that this ancient structure was within the Book of Mormon until a young missionary in 1967 discovered it, and then that it's there in our scriptures, so in the Book of Mormon. So I think that is a great um, thing to testify that Joseph Smith was a prophet, because I think that no 23-year-old kid wants to play with chiasmus. I know my own son, when he was 23, even just to try to get him to read a scripture was hard enough, let alone, trying to say, all right, you have to fabricate scripture and do a whole bunch of Hebrew parallel forms in it. It's just astronomically too hard for a 23-year-old kid. So, anyhow, I think chiasmus is a great faith builder for those of us who believe in the Book of Mormon, because there's literally some amazing chiasmus structures that have been hidden within the Book of Mormon that we didn't discover till, I mean, some even recently. I found some that no one had discovered just because I kind of looked through stuff. So there's still stuff to find within the Book of Mormon that's awesome. So hope you like the stuff. Give me a thumbs up and subscribe. You can consider it your own missionary work, because if you give this video a thumbs up, then chances are Google will push it out to some other folks. Could be Christian folks that are not um, a member of our particular faith, but by giving it a thumbs up, maybe you kind of help get this message out to other people. So do give me a thumbs up so that Google will, or YouTube will, push this out to other folks out there. So thanks for being here. Hope you appreciate the channel. We'll see you. Bye.